saw that. Brick killed a guy.
More MCU content on Disney+. Werewolf by Night. Will this continue the downward trend of Phase 4 of the MCU? Will we see another stinker placed at the feet of fans who are growing more and more distant from the franchise they once loved? Well, no. Werewolf by Night was shockingly great. More than that, it casts a new light on the entirety of Phase 4. What seemed like a scrambled mess is now starting to take shape, all thanks to this hour-long Halloween special featuring a Marvel character that many of us had never heard of. The short film follows a group of monster hunters gathered to compete for the right to own the Bloodstone, a supernatural tool that weakens and repels monsters. The group will participate in a battle royale style hunt to determine the new owner of the stone. The two main characters of the story are Jack Russell and Elsa Bloodstone. Elsa is the estranged daughter of Ulysses, the original owner of the stone who has now died and is passing it on. Jack is revealed to be a friend of the monster that the group is hunting and later a werewolf himself. Werewolf by Night is a proper short story, a format that I've always thought lended itself best to the horror genre. It takes obvious inspiration from classic horror movies like The Wolfman and Frankenstein from the 1930s and 40s, down to the cue marks present in some of the scenes throughout the special. Even when Jack transforms into a werewolf, we get the practical effects that we could have seen if Werewolf by Night was made in the 30s. A massive departure from the MCU's over-reliance on CGI and a much better fit for the tone of the film. This is also in the running for the most violent MCU introduction we've seen, opening the door for some R-rated movies with Blade, Ghost Rider, and Deadpool down the line. So Werewolf by Night was fantastic, and you should watch it if you haven't already. But more than being a great standalone film, it illuminated the intention of the entirety of Phase 4, and shows how great some of these failed projects could have been if they had the right people working on them.
Ted?
I f***ed her with a parsnip last week.
Phase 4 of the MCU has been very little apart from a disappointment. The Spider-Man movies were great, but the rest of the film and TV released since Endgame has felt like it's lost its way. The best part of the MCU, to me, has always been the interconnected stories that push a main plot forward with each release. There'd be a dud here and there throughout the first 3 phases, but all the movies were building to something bigger. In Phase 4, with all the hours of content available in theaters and on Disney+, that feeling has all but disappeared. None of the mainline movies have done anything to develop the next big bad of the MCU. Even Multiverse of Madness, which many expected to hint at something coming in the future, did nothing but kill Wanda and introduce America Chavez. Phase 4 is coming to an end now, and it seems reasonable to assume that we won't be getting any Thanos-level threats looming over our head before its end. All that's left in Phase 4 is a standalone Groot series, Black Panther, and what looks to be the final Guardians of the Galaxy film. Loki was the only series to even reference King the Conqueror, so it looks like we'll have to wait till Ant-Man Quantumania until that plotline properly kicks off, which is also the beginning of Phase 5. So with that in mind, what was the goal of Phase 4? And how does Werewolf by Night illuminate that goal?
See you on the big screen.
Really?
No.
As far as I see it, the MCU is trying to expand its horizons with Phase 4. They're planning for a future where their content isn't reliant on a complex, decade-long story. Sure, they can tie things together here and there, but they seem to be more interested in stories set in the MCU rather than putting the universe at the forefront of each movie or show. Whether or not you think that's a good direction for the MCU, it seems clear that that's the intention of this phase. But more specifically, the MCU is expanding what it means to be a Marvel movie. Some of the Phase 4 movies and shows followed the traditional Marvel format, but just as many broke away from it. For every Shang-Chi and Moon Knight, there was a WandaVision and What If. Love and Thunder was, for better or worse, the first romantic comedy set in the Marvel Universe. You know how I feel about She-Hulk if you watched my video, but it's a completely different take on Marvel content, a true sitcom set in the MCU. This brings me, finally, back to Werewolf by Night, the first time Marvel's really pulling this off. Multiverse of Madness can be considered a horror movie to some extent, but Werewolf by Night is the first time Marvel completely embraced the genre. This special was one of the best introductions we've seen on Disney Plus to date. It brought forward completely new characters in a way that felt much more like a classic horror flick than just another MCU origin story. And while Werewolf by Night is set in the MCU, we've seen very little that would relate to anything else going on in that universe. It could be isolated to its own world and it would still work fine, which is something you can't say for almost any other Disney Plus Marvel show. After watching Werewolf by Night, I walked away thinking, okay, I see what Marvel's going for here. It no longer seems like a once great franchise that completely lost its way. Now I see Phase 4 for what it is. It's a successful franchise trying something different, and mostly failing. It's like that band you used to love. Their first few albums were great, but they lost you when they started getting experimental. That's the MCU right now.
Hey, Billy Joel, do up Listen, motherfucker, we only sing 80s gold. So take your skank hooker wife and get the fuck out of here.
To me, Phase 4 has felt like homework with no reward. It's like your teacher gives you required reading every night and then never quizzes you in class the next day. Why am I reading this shit if I'm never gonna need the information? Finally, the teacher assigned an interesting chapter. I don't care if it's not on the test. Werewolf by Night is great. It's not cheesy, it doesn't pander, it's a legitimately good film that I'd watch even if it wasn't related to Marvel. And that's truly the first time I've felt that way about anything in Phase 4. If the objective of this phase is to break apart the predetermined MCU format, Werewolf by Night is the first time they successfully did it. Of course, that's just my take. If you think Werewolf by Night was as trash as She-Hulk, then let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.